Hello, welcome to Forest Focus on a Monday morning when I feared there'd be nothing new to talk about until John Percy came through with a Saturday night piece suggests that Sean Dyche could be the next Nottingham Forest manager. So should they just put Ange Postecoglou out of his misery now? Would Dyche be a good appointment? And how miserable have the last few months been? Joining me to discuss all that and more, first of all, is Michael Temple. Temps, good morning. How are you?
Feeling good, actually, Matt. We're late today because of me. I was trying to get my AirPods working, but they just caused an echo. So the wire lives on for an extra week.
Nothing wrong with the wire. I've got them as well. Functional and do the job, which might be what we talk about for the next hour or so. I don't know.
Like a Volvo.
God, is that a good manager analogy? We'll use that one as well, possibly. Pete Blackburn, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. I'm sort of piecing together the fragments of my life after the big Saturday at the beer festival on the weekend. But yeah, Temps and crew put on a great occasion, so had a lovely time. And also met some really nice podcast viewers as well, which was good.
Oh, lovely. Did you bump into Temps, or is he an all-seeing overlord at these?
No, I was there Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Yeah, he was coming.
I did have a little look around and peer through his new office window, but sadly not in there.
No, not there on Saturday. Lovely stuff. Right, returning to the show today, you'll remember Rob Adcock from our Europa League draw a million years ago. Rob, good to have you back. How are you today?
Very well, thank you very much. I love the fact that it wasn't me that caused the issues that started. I've been obviously having listened to the podcast and known about technical issues. And in fact, it was Michael Temple's new chief executive wages that he spent on the top of the range kit that slowed everyone down, which I'm very happy about.
You've got proper kit. I can see you've got a proper mic stand and everything there. So, yeah.
Don't come at me about kit with a mic stand and a headphone.
Right, let's get into it then. As mentioned in the intro there, a piece in the Telegraph by John Percy and Sam Wallace on Saturday evening saying that Sean Dyche is the front runner for the job should Ange Postecoglou get the sack at Nottingham Forest. Then a piece in the BBC, I think by Sammy Mockbell, said the same thing. And Rafa Benitez has also been touted by Football Insider. So we'll get into that. Temps, kick us off. First of all, I suppose, is this story kite flying by Forest, do you think, to gauge public opinion, or because it's by John and in the Telegraph, there's more to it?
John will have had a steer, and I think when you see a name mentioned in the papers as we have in the past, it's been to float the relative credibility feeling towards that manager versus the incumbent. And there was a negative reaction when Steve Cooper was in a similar position. I think what's making Ange particularly fragile here is that he's probably losing some of the increasing support every day, every time there's a negative result. And briefing the name of an alternative isn't going to engender quite such the rebellion it did when Steve Cooper was in the post. So there does feel a certain air of inevitability now that Ange's days may be numbered, and it's a case of when, not if. But I take no pleasure in seeing that, because I think we all wanted to get behind any manager that comes to our club that can enact positive results. And that's what's missing here. We saw shoots in Seville. We saw shoots in the first half against Swansea. But ultimately, the wins haven't been there. And with what's to come at the weekend, it feels like a particularly challenging fixture to go in. You need something miraculous to save your job. So, yeah, I take no pleasure in saying it, but I do think Ange's days are numbered at this point.
You've not been on for, as I said, Rob, a million years. So I can't remember who. Oh, yeah, obviously. No, who was our manager then? I can't remember. Where are you at on Ange anyway?
I think it's just disappointment more than anything. I think, again, I don't want to kind of just repeat what other people have said on the podcast over the last few weeks. But for me, it's just you've gone from being in a position, speaking purely as a football fan rather than the kind of the bits that come with it. You've gone from the excitement of, I can't believe it, we're going to be in Europe, we're going to get all these amazing away days, we're going to go and see these places that it's the time when you go and watch football abroad and you're like, just imagine what this would be like doing this with my mates, watching the club that I enjoy and I love. And then you're in a position now where we're looking at changing the manager again. And it's just, to answer the question, you can't see how he's going to kind of stay on now. And if these names are getting floated, it usually comes from somewhere. And if it's coming from someone like John Percy, you know that it has got something behind it. I think more than anything, I think it's just disappointment of what we thought was going to be the greatest season, going around to different parts of Europe and having all these amazing memories. Just feels a little bit like, Oh, does it have to be this way?
Pete, would you like to apologise to Rob there?
Well, I don't feel like this is my fault, but someone with any sort of vague IT knowledge might need to help me. But I've turned the system sounds off on my laptop, and something is going on where they're just ignoring me. They've got no respect for me whatsoever. So I do apologise, but I also, I want to blame this awful piece of technology that my work included.
You know it's bad when you've lost the sound systems or system sounds, should I say? Yeah. Right, Pete. I suppose the thing about this report is as well, I do feel for Ange, because it feels like it's not very conducive to him having a cat in hell's chance of getting a result with all this stuff going on. Thoughts on that? And the other question I was going to ask was, should we just get it over with now? Because it just feels doomed at the moment. And if we're putting stories out, or stories are coming out in the Telegraph by John Percy that this is what's happening, it feels, as Temp said, rather inevitable, or not?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I think Rob's summed it up really perfectly. It feels like we've gone from having this sort of great moment of ambition and hope, and that's just been so quickly punctured by the reality of what's happened this season. And I guess that's what happens at the highest level when things aren't perfect, and we've had such good sort of joined up strategy in the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, whatever it's been, that we've really avoided that sort of stuff. But suddenly you make one mistake and things can fall apart pretty quickly at this sort of punishing level. So yeah, it's really sad that we're here. I think you're right that if John Percy of anyone is reporting it, then it's probably likely that there's there's something to it, and it's being supported by someone inside the club. So I said last time, I'm not sure if it was last time I was on with Temps and Kelv, we were talking about exactly this question, really. And I think if you're already at the point where you're saying it's on the Chelsea game whether we pull the trigger or not, then I don't understand why you're not doing it already, to be honest. Anyone who was at the Michelin game, I think you'd be hard pushed to argue that there's much hope at the moment. Things are so soured that I just think you might as well be decisive at this point, accept that everything was a big old mistake, and just part ways and move on, to be honest. If you're already considering other people, I think the truth is, and we've seen this a lot during the Marinakis reign, that he probably just hasn't been able to get the person or people that are right at the top of his list. And Dyche is probably a few people down that list. And you're working your way down it, seeing if you can convince the people that you really want, whether that's a Marco Silva or another name. But if we'd have been able to make those sort of inroads, I think Ange probably would already be gone. So I suspect that's where we're at with things.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, certainly, about what it says about where we're at. Let's talk a bit about Dyche, obviously, as an option. I'll break it down into some specific questions, but in general terms, what would your feeling be if he was the next manager?
I'd get behind him. I think I've done a bit of reading up recently as well, and he describes it as direct football, but he defines it as not always being automatic long ball. I think that he's been in situations where he has been needs must and situationally aware. He's not blindly bided to a philosophy in quite the way that some other managers are. And I think if he was to be given a chair with the resource, with the depth, with the buy-in from a club to back his wishes, he would evolve the manner of football, the style of football, which he's almost accused of being a champion for. I think he's gone in and done a good job over a consistent period of time at football clubs with lower expectation than ours, less resources than ours, and not always the ability to manoeuvre in the transfer windows in quite the way that we can. I think it's a nice bit of a romantic edge that Steve Stone and Ian won't stand on either side of him. And I think he would command instant respect from the majority of Forest fans. It's not ideal going from Nuno to Ange to Dyche. It sends an extremely scrambled message to a set of players who look a bit bewildered and dumbfounded at this moment in time. But I think he can get a philosophy across quickly. And I think we all owe it to him to go and do our own bits of research and just look at the manner in which he's been able to improve teams and clubs.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I did watch the coach's voice thing on how he plays, and there do seem to be core principles. It's the question of whether he can, with, I think it's fair to say, better players at Forest, he can get more out of them. I mean, I made a few quick notes. The wingers have to work exceedingly hard in his systems. They have to get up and down. One of them's got to tuck in all the time to prevent counter attacks. The number 9 is super important because, as Chris Wood played for him at Burnley, he's going to go into you a lot, and you've got to hold it up. But there is more to that, and I think it's kind of simple principles, but I hope there's some more nuance behind it. But can you get the ball? Can you start attacks quickly? And then can you get midfielders on the ball in better areas? I think is the sort of core principles of it. It's sort of Nuno-esque, but there's different variants of it. But it does have a reputation, Rob, of being pretty functional football. Everton fans by the end were thoroughly sick of it. To be fair, I think it's fair to say. What would you feel about seeing that kind of football at Forest?
I think for me, if someone said to me when they said that Nuno is probably going to leave, that you're going to end up with Sean Dyche in 2 months, 3 months time, I'd have been a bit like, is there no way we can just fix what's happened with Nuno, if I was being completely honest? But exactly like Temp says, if he's the manager, you're going to have to get behind him and see how he gets on. Am I excited by it? No, I'm definitely not excited by it. Is it one of those things where you think, right, well, can I see him potentially? When people talk about ceilings and about where they're going to go with the club and where they're going to fall away to, I don't think that we are going to go off and be competing for Champions League places with Sean Dyche, but I also don't think we're going to fall back into the Championship. Whereas when you've got Nuno, you don't know where you're going to go. And I'm not saying, and I know people are going to say, oh, well, Nuno did this, he did this wrong, he did this right, etc., etc. But I'm not necessarily excited by Sean Dyche. I was doing a thing this morning where I was just ringing around people that either knew him or had worked with him or just get a bit more of an understanding of what he's like as a manager. And you get really mixed responses where people that say, look, he's really effective. He is a good manager. He knows what he's doing. And it'd be disrespectful to sit here and say he's not a good manager because he obviously, he's managed at Everton. I've not managed at Everton. None of us on the panel have got to that point. So it's tricky. It's just the uncertainty of, is he the person that's like romantic and is going to lead us to European glory? However unrealistic that is, I can't see it, but we're just going to have to see what happens with it all, I think.
On the show the other day, Pete, I think Dan Story said, in reference to something Rob was saying about Ange removes the floor, as in, Forest could finish anywhere. I think he said from 11th to 20th. Is the thing about Dyche is, I guess it puts the floor back in, and maybe it's not a very exciting floor, but it's hopefully above a relegation zone. And is the plan he brings stability in the short term, at least, which is what we're sorely lacking, it feels, at the moment.
I think the thing about the floor being raised is probably true. Although I must say, I do think it's really hard to judge what you might get from a manager based on a couple of spells at other football clubs that are so different. So much of that time at Burnley just feels pretty incomparable to me. The sorts of players he had, the sorts of expectations, the type of club. I just don't know how much you can really take from it. But I do sort of instinctively feel that analysis is probably right. I mean, there's always been like an element of inevitability about Dyche and Forest, but I did think that this summer that might have gone. And that's why I guess it all feels as sort of like an admission of failure in a sense that, the strategy has been problematic in the last few months, and things have obviously gone pretty badly wrong. I mean, to move back to Dyche as your preferred option, given everything that has been said and reported about this, this intent to change the way that the football club plays and stuff, it's a long way away from those intentions. So it's hard not to see it as that sort of admission of failure, I guess. But then having said that, I've also spoken regularly about how important it is this season that things don't go belly up, because I think if Forest end up getting relegated to the Championship with the squad we've got right now, suddenly we're in real trouble, because PSR is an issue as it is already. We're going to be in a position of weakness and looking to sell probably quite a lot of players at that point. And it's just not the way that you want the model to run whatsoever. You need things to be running smoothly so that we can keep building from a strong position. So it's hard to know what to make of all of it. But I do think that, I think Dyche gets pigeonholed as being, I guess kindly people would talk about him as being a bit old school. But, some would probably use the terms like dinosaur and all that sort of stuff. And there's a touch of the sort of Martin O'Neill about it, I guess. The thing that worries me more actually than the football, I think I'm not so bothered about the football. I think, Forest fans have generally been pretty content with our sides being compact, organised, working really hard, and then looking to break under both Cooper and Nuno. They've shown time for that. Actually, if anything, the opposite with Ange and being so open and vulnerable has been, a massive concern for fans, and you can hear the sort of stress of it in the ground. What I think I'm maybe more anxious about with the whole Dyche thing is the sort of man management and the off the pitch stuff, because if you listen to him talk about how he runs the dressing room and stuff, it is so old school. And I don't know whether, I don't want to sort of assume that he's just always going to be that way and isn't going to change. But, this is a very different dressing room to the one that he had at Burnley. That was a group full of sort of grizzled veterans. And, we've got an international squad of young, modern footballers who I'm not sure how well they would react to being asked to give their teammates a lap dance or jump in the Trent or whatever. So I'm interested to see how that will play out if this does happen. I think I'd be more concerned about that than anything. So I think the football will sort of, in a sense, be the right thing to do because, we're on a bit of a precipice right now, and being compact and organised and getting back to some of that simplicity might be the right thing to do. I think if you look elsewhere from Dyche, if you can't get a Silva, someone who's a safe pair of hands, but can be sort of progressive as well. The free agent names out there, they're all big gambles. Even the ones that are, sort of vaunted names from abroad, like Rosa or Spalletti or Thiago Motta. They're enormous gambles to bring them into England for their first ever job in the circumstances we're in right now. So it's hard. I think we're in a difficult position because the strategy has failed ultimately, and it's the first time it's failed for a good little while now. So it all feels a bit uncertain and scary. But yeah, that's where I'm at with Dyche, I think.
Lorena's Snapchat stories are really going to pick up if we've got lap dancing going on there. That's one thing that is
so true.
to look forward to, I suppose. I think, sorry to jump in, but I think it just feels like, again, when you look at it as a fan, it just feels like it felt like we were past all this kind of scrambling around of who's going to be the next manager. It felt like we'd moved on from that. It felt like we've got a plan in place where you're about sporting directors of group ownership, and it felt like, well, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. We're going to bring in these players because this is the way we want to play. And now it feels like, oh, actually, that one's not worked. Let's get rid of him and see what else is going to happen next on in.
Just before we get back to it, let's take a word for the Trent navigation. A reminder, the Chelsea game is on TV. It's a 12:30 kickoff, so the nav opens at 9 a.m. Breakfast and full bar, like an airport. What a combination for that time of the day. Lovely. Pre-match with Fothers. Watch the game live, obviously, if you don't have a ticket. And then post-match is an afternoon set with Sanj Berry, and Soccer Saturday is on. And then it's Fulham v Arsenal at 5:30 p.m. So you can make a day of it at the nav. Thanks, Les Sports. Have a quick video to remind you of what you get on match days.
Hey up me duckies, a quick rundown of match days at the Big Shed. We're open from 10, serving full English breakfast, teas, coffees and, believe it or not, beers. Father's Footy Quiz is followed by the lunchtime kickoffs, and the outdoor kitchen is fired up from midday, serving sourdough pizzas, burgers, hot dogs, pies and sausage rolls. Lovely. Pints start at £4. We have a great selection of cask ales and lagers to lubricate the vocal cords for a bit of a sing-song before the game. After the match, we've got some great DJs and live bands booked. So get your send down to the Trent Nav. Win or lose, we're having a booze. And if we draw, we'll have some more.
Just a couple of sort of pro and con Dyche points. I mean, at Everton, we forget they had a points deduction. They went down to 4 points in November. That's a tough situation to manage. They would have finished that season in 12th. On the other hand, David Moyes has come in and took 31 points in 19 games after Dyche left, 42 in 26, so he's got a lot more out of them. They do have a better team this season. Dyche's overall record, which Pete said feels a million years ago, I mean, Burnley, 36%, 1.3 points per game. Everton, 31, 1.2 points per game. That Burnley team, I mean, they had he was talking about Jeff Hendrick playing as a number 10 in Europe, so that feels like a different world as well. And I suppose, Temps, the thing is, you could say the football it can be bad, the fans wouldn't like it, but this is arguably the best group he'd have to work with, and a chance for him to show more. So are you open-minded about that, or do you fear that it would be a very, very functional team, and sort of like what you're getting with Ange, you sort of know what you're getting with Dyche no matter what?
Give him credit for what he's done at Burnley. He's got them promoted. He's been disrupted by relegation. He's got them back up again, and he's led them into Europe. And I think to all of the points that the fellas make about player buy-in and supporter buy-in, players and fans will buy into winning football, not irrespective of style. There's certain things that are expected at Forest and at particular clubs. But if Ange had have won 5 out of 7, we'd be behind him. There's no philosophical argument against some of the principles that he's trying to impose, and there won't be for Sean Dyche or whoever the next man up is. Winning football is what we've been spoilt with over the last 6-7 months of last season. Steve Cooper's championship charge, and that's what we want to see again. And Sean Dyche, if forgiven is the wrong word, will be instantly forgiven if he is to put a bit of a run together to stabilise us and then look to kick on and march forward once more. This isn't any kind of personal or crusade against either of the two fellas that we're debating today. It's about the expectation to see winning football and to add value to a group of players. This squad we've got now is stronger than last season, but the output isn't. It needs somebody to galvanise them, and I think Sean Dyche is the kind of character to do that.
Another thing that was spoken about the other day, I think by Adam Summerton, Rob, was when he said about the need for a unifying force. He was referencing Claudio Ranieri at Roma. And obviously hasn't been that. Dyche, in a sense, could be, because we know he absolutely wants the job. He's got the Forest connections. We'll do a bit on Stone and Wone. Is that part of the thing that might play into it in his favour, that he'd probably say the right things and at least buy himself time with the fans that Ange never really has done?
The couple of things that I found really interesting about Ange Postecoglou, and these are one of the points I wanted to make, was one of the things that was one of my big bugbears is when you hear a post-match interview and a manager says, "Oh, the fans were fantastic," and everyone who's listened to it kind of, especially if you're working around the media, like, well, kind of it's a stock answer that you give, and you kind of dismiss it and think to yourself, "All right, okay, he's just saying the things that he needs to say." But this is, if anyone's ever putting together a coaching manual or a kind of a textbook on how to be a manager and what happens when you don't do the certain norms of what are expected of you, this is possibly the perfect example. Because if he'd have come in and said the things that you kind of supposed to say, and although it can be frustrating to hear it every single week, would we be in this position as quickly? I'm not so sure. There's a couple of things that happened in that first interview, the first press conference with Ange Postecoglou, I thought was really interesting. First of all, that 18-month contract. I've got my broadband contract is longer than that. And if you're signing that as a football manager, that must be one of the things that must be ringing a few alarm bells. But then he kept referring to, I think I spoke to Greg about this at the time. I think I was texting him saying, he kept referring to Steve Cooper as Coops. So you must assume that they are good friends and everyone says that they're good friends, etc., etc. So how on earth has there not been a conversation where Steve Cooper's gone, do you know what? What you need to do is the fans can be at some points quite, let's say, excitable. If you just come out and say these 3 things, it'll buy you a bit of time. And how can you not see that is just a way to do it? Even if you don't agree with it, sometimes you must just think to yourself, well, if I just do this, it's going to buy me a little bit of time. That's my thoughts to that point. But the other points about Sean Dyche, as I say, I spoke to a few different people this morning that have either worked with him in the past at a few different football clubs. And the one thing that they did say about him is he's exceptional with the players. They say that not necessarily sure if he's got loads of things when it comes to a plan B, when his plans aren't going to plan tactically, but in around the players, he'll get them running. He is effective. But the best, when I asked this person what the best thing about him was, is that he's not prone to swings of emotion. So you're not going to get one end of the scale to the other. He's always going to be consistently around the same kind of middleish area, which I imagine if you're a footballer and you've signed, let's say you're Amari Hutchinson, you've signed for a football club under one manager, that new manager's put his arm around you on his first day, he's gone now. And it's happened at clubs up and down it's happened at clubs everywhere where someone will come in, a new sporting director, they'll sack a manager. And I will let someone else talk in a second. But it's the point where you think to yourself, where from Forest's point of view, they are not innocent in all of this, because this has been such a mismanaged case of PR from the very beginning. Because if you're thinking to yourself, right, I want to get rid of a manager, it needs to be kind of a drip, 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 so everyone's along on the same page to when they eventually go. Yes, some fans might not be happy about it, but ultimately people are around the same area by the time they actually leave. I think it probably went, arguably, from a point of view of fan perception, a little bit too early on Nuno. Again, I'm not saying that it's football, means you should stay longer, etc., etc. But I'm just saying, to the point of view, if you want to get fans on side, surely it's a case of making it over a longer period of time rather than someone says, I'm not sure this is working, get rid of them. Because I don't think necessarily that a massive amount of the fans were behind him going in the first place. And that's always going to be tricky.
Matt, I know we're not talking about Ange so much now, but I just want to say, Rob is absolutely bang on about Ange and his handling of the situation. I think when he came to the club, I had sort of two big worries. I think one was the too much change thing, which I think has sort of played out and isn't that much of a surprise. The other one was that he just hadn't had a break, and I think he's come into Forest like unbelievably in this sort of embattled situation where straight from the beginning he's been sort of fighting fires, whether it's the media, whether it's the fans, whatever. It doesn't seem like someone who wants to take everyone with him. It seems like someone who is still having the same battle that he was for the last 18 months. And it's a long time. People talk about him finishing fifth or whatever in that first year, but actually how many good months did they actually have? After that, it was just constant questions about his style, questions about injuries. Are you the man for the job? Why are you still here? Blah, blah, blah. And I think he's shown that he just hasn't had time away from it, because he's come in the same bloke that he left Spurs. I think that's just a massive problem for starting a new job, really. And that thing about the fans, if I honestly believe that if he'd have started his press conferences or his interviews with, look, I'm going to make a lot of changes here, and it's going to be really difficult. We're on a sort of long path to a very different sort of project, and I know sometimes it's going to feel a bit scary and very different, but I know what you guys have done as fans. I've seen what you guys did under Steve Cooper, under Nuno, and you've carried the team through so many difficult moments. We need you every step of the way. You're going to be a vital part of this. And whether you think that's like sort of it's just words or whatever, I don't think it is. I think it's an enormously important part of management, and we just haven't seen any of that. And that's why, for me, it just feels like the whole thing was destined to fail for all of those reasons, really.
Yeah, we'll definitely get back to Ange. He is still our manager. I'm conscious that we spent 27 minutes talking about people that aren't our manager. But I just wanted to wrap it all with one last thing on the Dyche stuff, and then some general principles of where we are. Are you bothered, Temps, about the Wone and Stone thing and the romanticism? Because I remember I've spoken to people like Stuart Pearce, and there was a lot of romanticism about him, but that management job fell apart pretty quickly. Is it just a bonus? We're not bothered at all about it.
It's a positive, isn't it? Having an immediate figurehead's the wrong word, because they do fall in behind Dyche and they're very loyal to him, but just an immediate reference point that chimes with the Forest fans, that they don't have to research, and just engenders memories of a really good period for Forest. I'm kind of immediately thinking about Woney's goals against Newcastle, or Stoney in that team that did so well in the Premier League. I think the club has struggled at times when historic successes have cast a bit of a shadow, and people have shied away from talking about that. Having those two in the club who understand the ethos, have been part of a successful period of time, and are instantly viewed with positivity and sentiment from the support base can only be a positive thing. So I think it's a bonus having them there. To Pete's point as well, I know there will be, and I hope there is, the sports scientist or the fitness coach or the technicality in the background that can support and enhance the things that they're going to put in terms of culture, because you need both. You need strategy and culture to create a winning team, especially when you are being parachuted in as a bit of a rescue job at this kind of point in the season. But I think it's a big positive for all concerned to have those two stood on Dyche's shoulders.
Do you think more generally, Rob, we're at a point where we're not writing a season off, but we're going for that kind of appointment where you're trying to be safe, be secure, as Pat says, no Ange, no Dyche, it's a backward step. We need to move forwards. Is it that bad at the moment that we should be going for this kind of manager? Or is it more the case, as Pete says, this is the manager who will take the job, and we might have been knocked back by a lot of others?
Yeah, it's exactly like Pete says, isn't it? You wonder where Sean Dyche comes on that list when it comes to who is going to replace Big Ange when he eventually goes. It's exactly that. You think to yourself, it feels like an appointment that someone does in, say, like the start of February, because you need to stay up and your back's against the wall. So it feels quite early for that. But how far are we away from that if you really want to be negative? I can't say this, I struggle to say this without sounding like a little bit of a muppet, but I was co-presenting a programme on BBC iPlayer a couple of months ago. You know, when Oasis did the first gig in Cardiff, and like Michael Temps was just mentioned there, some of my favourite members of Forest are Ian Woan, Steve Stone, etc., etc. And Sean Dyche was one of the guests, and we were doing some bits and pieces downstairs. And as Sean Dyche was about to leave, I realised that Ian Woan was also there. So I went a beeline across them both. And I think Sean Dyche was automatically assuming that I was going to speak to him as the more well-known one, but then spent the next 15 minutes chewing Ian Woan's ear off about those goals, etc., etc. And it was nice, because it must have been one of those things where he thinks to himself, I don't usually get the attention for this. But again, it's a story that's got no real funny ending, but it was just a nice thing for Ian Woan, I'm sure.
Just lastly, before we talk about this week a bit, there's a line in the piece as well, Pete, saying that by John, Marinakis considered Steve Cooper, mentions he's in work at Bromby. I don't know if that's a PR line to the fans, but I find that really worrying, frankly, if that's the case. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me preface this with my admiration for Steve Cooper. He obviously achieved phenomenal things with the football club, and I will always massively love him for that. I mean, I even sent him a little letter a few days before he was sacked, in a sort of tragic act of sentimentality from me. But my God, if that's true, that would worry me enormously, to be honest, because, and this is not a slight on Steve Cooper at all, but you're talking about an owner who has gone from us seeming to be in a pretty strong sense of what we are as a football club, operating relatively calmly with a good structure around things and a good strategy around things, to suddenly considering hiring a manager that he spent months trying to get rid of. Undermined quite a bit, in my opinion, and also had to be convinced by the fans not to sack twice while he sort of worked his way down a list, I think probably longer than 10, 12 names of people he was trying to get to take the job. I don't understand how those two things come together. And that feels to me like an indication that there's a sense of panic and indecision and mess around things right now. And I hope that we can get away from that and get back to a sense of stability. Because you said earlier, and you asked a question of one of the other chaps about whether Dyche is the sort of manager who brings stability. I think the truth is that at Nottingham Forest Football Club, it's the owner who brings stability or doesn't. And hopefully, I think we've seen recently that there's been much more of a sense of that from, in the early days of his reign. It was very chaotic. And we've always had a lot of incomings and outgoings, obviously. But, we've sort of slowly built into this model of recruitment that looks really strong, of having a much more settled operation behind the scenes, and things felt pretty smooth. But suddenly you read a line like that, and I don't want to give it too much credence, because maybe it is just nonsense, or maybe it's just a throwaway thing. But if that's true, that feels like a real sort of representation of sort of muddled thinking and failure of strategy that would concern me a bit.
Bruce, you've asked my next question. You did do Sky, didn't you, Temps, before at 10 a.m? What was the questioning? Was the questioning the line along those lines of what a mess Forest are? Isn't it all catastrophic, or was it not like that? I'm trying to interested in the outside perception.
It was simply the for and against. I think Tim Sherwood rightly said that it's absurd that any manager is considered for the sack after having 12 days on the training pitch in between an international break and a pretty frenetic fixture list. And I think there's credibility in that, obviously. And I think if the stakes were lower and we weren't in this kind of precipice and position the table, you probably would give Ange time. But I think that the challenge we've got is recent memory is watching us surrender a lead at Swansea, seeing us get turned over at home by Sunderland, and then the Danes turning up a few days later and doing it again. But there is some nuance to this, and I don't want anyone to think that we're celebrating in any way the potential removal of a manager, because everybody's greatest wish is for results to dictate that can't happen and shouldn't be considered. But I've never quite felt we've been in this position in the last 3-4 years, even when we've been hovering around the relegation zone, that there wasn't a visual plan in front of us, a way of playing, a method to get us out of trouble. And having seen the last few games and having seen some of the selections and the things we're doing stylistically, it just feels a little bit different at this point. I don't think there's going to be an upturn. I'm not seeing any evidence of how there's going to be an upturn without a change of direction. And one thing everyone knows about Ange, for better or for worse, he commits wholeheartedly to this strategy, this style. And it helped him to win the Europa League with Spurs, but it was to the detriment of their league form. And there are games in which you need to have plans B, C, and D.
I suppose as well, the wider media thing, Rob, is around. I don't think pundits really appreciate what the Forest fans have been through necessarily. You know, all those years in the wilderness and that innate fear that it could come back, combined with the end of last season. We blew the Champions League for whatever reason. We discussed it at length, and then went into this season with so much optimism. And it feels like, as Tem said, if there's no plan, no foundation, then, you know, this season, is it just now? I don't think we really answered the question before. Is this season effectively a sort of a write-off in the Premier League, and Europe, what will be, or is it too early for that?
It feels like that's the way it's going, doesn't it? And again, it's an emotional answer because it's a club that you support. I suppose if it's easy if you are a pundit and you've got no attachment to the situation to say, oh, you can say this, but it's exactly like Temps was just saying there. It's years worth of. We've got to a point where we thought that everything was on the right track. We thought we were going to go off and have this amazing adventure. And then here we are, that we've brought this new manager in who some people were unsure about. It's not gone the way it wanted it to off the field with what he's been saying. It's not gone the way we wanted to, definitely on the pitch with the results that we've got. And then now all of a sudden, it's not going to plan. You don't see a way that it's going to turn around. And that's where the insecurity comes from, I suppose, more than anything. It's because you want it to be so good, and then it's so clearly not running to plan that's what makes you a little bit nervous.
It's just, Matt, it's flat pack punditry. It's like, it's nonsense. It's obviously true, and we've all referenced it so many times since we've been having these conversations, that it is absurd to be talking about a manager being sacked at this period of time, having, you know, basically no games and, you know, for 8 days training or something mad. But you have to look into things more than that. You can't have a rule for everything that is this amount of games is okay, everything else is bad, and I will say it's bad. Everything is in the greys. It's all in the nuance and the context between things. And you only have to be there on Thursday night to see what an absolute mess things are. If it looks like we might have lost Matt. But luckily for Matt, I can talk for ages. And I was just going to say, on the other thing, I think Rob's right to worry about where we're at. But I don't think we're there yet, but that's what's driving my concern that we need to take action, is that we will be there in the next international break. And for me, that feels like a situation that we just cannot let happen. This is a season of enormous opportunity, and it doesn't have to stop being that yet. But I want to see us try and change the course of events before we get to the situation where we are just firefighting. I don't know what you think about that, Temps.
Totally agree. I think, look, fellas, irrespective of the managerial chat, there's a game to prepare for at the weekend, isn't there? And that's going to be a very different approach depending on who's in the chair. Rob, how do you think Ange will prepare for Chelsea? And will we see a move to be more solid and perhaps not chase the win and an opportunity to kind of displace this ruthless attacking intent that we've seen? Or will he stick to type?
See, this is why he's a chief executive. Did you see how much he fired straight into action then when he realised?
Rob's audio as well now. Pete, same question to you.
I could hear Rob all right.
Could you? Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's because I was being disparaging towards you, Temps. That's why your audio dropped out.
I just tried to shut it down.
He jumped straight into, I'm in charge of this situation. I enjoyed it. I like seeing that. Yeah, if you are... The thing is with Ange, with most managers, you think, right, well, he might just go, right, okay, let's do whatever we can to try and make sure that we get a win at this point. Let's do everything we can just to make sure we can try and build from somewhere just so that I can get some points on the board, avoid a big defeat, so then we can go again and then we can at least do something about it. And we can be in a position further down the road where we can say, right, do you know what? Well, at least we've got a result there and we can build from there. But with Ange, you just don't know. And that's the thing. You think to yourself, he might still go, do you know what? That kind of Australian attitude of, no, do you know what? I'm going to do this, and then go out and see where he gets us. But again, that could lead to one of anything, which is, do we get battered against Chelsea at the weekend, or do we get an amazing win? And this conversation, this whole podcast has been a waste of time because he goes on to have a fantastic run as a Forest manager.
Sorry, I'm back. Little Chinese robot hoover was doing its route, and it somehow hoovered up the power cable for my Wi-Fi box.
I was really worried, Matt, because obviously I've been a long time listener to this podcast. I thought we were going to go all the way through, and you were going to be here all the way through the entire podcast. And I really wanted a front row seat as everyone scrambled to see where you were.
You'd have had to host. You're a professional host.
Temps did a fantastic job. It really was a masterclass.
Good on him. Right, we'll take a little interjection here, a little word for global telemetrics, and then someone in the private chat can type in and tell me what you just discussed, and I'll work out what we talk about next.
Forest Focus viewers, you may have seen what we've actually done over the past year in regards to vehicle theft. You might have those feelings of that it will never happen to me, or it won't happen to my car. Did you know that the most stolen car last year was a Ford Fiesta, and Global Telemetrics has noticed a big uptake of thefts in the Nottinghamshire area? Don't be another "it won't happen to me." Drop us an email on how we can protect your vehicle.
Thanks very much, Global Telemetrics. Much appreciated. Did we discuss about messaging to the players? From the Pete mentioned that right at the start. Just elaborate on that, Pete, about we don't know what the dressing room make of what's going on, but it's pretty confused messaging, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. These questions where you try and see into the sort of mind of professional athletes are tough, because I'm pretty clearly not one of them. But I think all workplaces or environments or cultures have plenty of common threads, don't they? And it does worry me a little bit that sense of knee-jerk change and movement away from the strategy has implications for everyone in the organisation. I don't want to overdo this. I don't think it's it's not catastrophic, and I don't think that moving from a manager and an intention to be more of a sort of proactive, possession-heavy team, all that sort of stuff, and then suddenly sort of saying, look, we've got this badly wrong, and changing course is something that is going to end your relationships with those players, and it's really going to kill the morale and stuff. But I do think that the successful operations, and Temps will be able to speak much better about this since he heads one currently, is that you have all of those common threads. Everyone is working in the same direction. There's alignment about where you're going, how you're going to do it, what your sort of key principles are, that sort of thing. And that's the thing that is disappointing about all of this more than anything, is it felt like Forest and the hierarchy had pulled together a real sort of sense of structure and plan and model and all that sort of stuff, those buzzwords that I use a lot. And suddenly it just feels like, that's all a little bit on fire, and it's not a position that I like being in. It feels quite uncomfortable. So I'd like to see us get back to that. But then I'm also pragmatic about it, and I understand that, this is a situation now where I do think you need fairly significant, quick action, decisive action. And I think it might be too difficult to ask another manager who's, as I said earlier, sort of stranger to the Premier League, to come in and be very progressive and very demanding and all that sort of stuff. And maybe that's not what you can do in the situation. Maybe you do need to be more realistic and more pragmatic now. And then we have to look at it again next summer. And that's a question we haven't talked about, is, that I think it was on your list to talk about Dyche and whether it could just be a 1 year thing or how that would be done. I mean, I think there are a lot of clever clauses and things that you have in football these days. I don't see any reason why you couldn't heavily monetize the success of this season and give lots of rewards for that, and then have a sort of fairly generous break clause if that's what was desired in the summer. I'm sure someone like Dyche would back himself to disprove any of the sort of cynicism that is in that contract. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered the question or not, to be honest, but I've said some words.
We were going to do a whole bit on Dyche in the summer, but I thought we were talking about him for so long. He's not even the manager yet. So yeah, go on, Temps. You want to come in, and Pete teed you up to come in as well there.
Well, I was going to say, we're not going to have to pay too much for a relocation package, are we? Because I saw him in the co-op a few weeks ago. So there's a little bit of cash save there.
Hasn't he got a flat that overlooks the City ground? Did someone say?
He did. I don't know if he still.
that.
I think he did.
They're definitely all around here. I mean, I think Steve Cooper, Ian Wayne lives out my way as well, so they're always knocking around. And as you know, Rob was saying about approaching Woney, I suspect that he gets that every day, to be honest, because he's one of those cool icons.
Just on Saturday as well, and I don't know if you discussed this already. I do feel for Ange, really. I mean, the atmosphere, Rob, if we concede the first goal, is going to be horrific and sort of seals his fate unless we win the game. So, I don't know, the fans, it's easy for us to say get behind the manager, isn't it? But, you know, it's going to be awful if we concede first.
Yeah, we were saying this just a few minutes ago. It's one of those things where you don't know what his attitude's going to be, and you can't really, again, this is just my kind of outlook on it, you can't really guess what he's going to do. Is he going to try and be as pragmatic as possible, where you think, right, I'll do anything I can to make sure I just get a result so that we stop thinking about things going wrong, and if I get a decent win here, we can move on. But that's what we said against Newcastle. It's how long does it go on for? But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what it's going to be like in that away. At the City Ground this weekend. If, like you say, they go 1-0 down, 2-0 down, and then it's not worth thinking about.
The Temps just messaged me saying he can only hear me and Pete. He can't hear Rob at all. So I don't know.
It's since the Hoover got involved, there's been some kind of glitch in the matrix, and now you know. I was going to say the most articulate member of the podcast. It's a high bar today with you three around me. But I can't hear a word that Rob says, but I'm sure it's absolutely golden.
He's smashing it, mate. Properly smashing it.
He is. You might have discussed this one already. Just last one on Ange, probably. Does he have any authority at the moment, Pete, or not, with what's going on?
I don't really know, to be honest. I suspect there's an element of business as usual inside the actual dressing room and the training ground and whatever. I think, you know, they're probably not talking about it as much as we are. But you know that the players that we have coming on the pod and whatever do say that, you know, you can't really hide from this sort of stuff, and they do know what's going on and they do discuss it, and it's going to have an impact, even if it's a sort of subconscious thing rather than a, you know, front of the minds sort of thing. That's why I just don't really get it. You know, I think at this point you should have either have made it very clear that this is a long-term project and that it's, you know, these are just bumps in the road that we could have foreseen, and that, you know, lots of the games have been really close and there's been an element of hard luck about some of it. And I think all of that stuff is true. And had Ange coming out and giving the sort of speech that I talked about earlier, and have Marinakis giving all the backing and saying, look, I understand that this is always going to be hard. And then I think, you know, that immediately removes a good percentage of some of the toxicity, because that's like, it's nipping it in the bud, isn't it? And clearly those feelings are still going to be there, but I don't think you would have the same reaction from the crowd and the same sort of intensity to that negativity. And you either do that or you move on. And I don't really understand why we're in this sort of limbo stage, apart from that maybe there's managers we'd rather have. And, you know, we're sort of leaving Dyche there as a sort of fallback option, which I sort of understand. But I just think we had a moment at the start of that international break where if you were decisive, you could have done exactly as I said, either put a plan in place to mitigate stuff and to keep going and to try and sort of have a clean slate, or to get somebody in and give them a couple of weeks to get to know the place, get to understand the environment, spend some time with a fair amount of the players, obviously not all of them. But, you know, even those little things like just spending time in your office or at the training ground and meeting staff and things, those are all important things that we forget about in football. And I feel like we've been slightly indecisive and not provided much clarity where we could have taken one of those two approaches. And I think that would impact players as well as fans.
Yeah. I mean, this hasn't been a very normal podcast. So we spent 49 minutes talking about probably the next manager and not the current one. And I don't think it's conducive for success for the club. Not us doing this particularly, although I haven't really enjoyed it on that basis. But, you know, for the football club, I don't think it's the right thing necessarily. Let's continue that just for a couple more minutes before we go. Then Rafa Benitez has also been mentioned. He's getting a lot of mentions in the chat. Temps, Rafa, if Rafa were to come in, what would you think?
Well, I'm Dyche over Rafa. I just think that, you know, generationally, I just associate more recent history of Premier League management with Sean Dyche. I'd imagine he's had his eye on the league that bit more. He's been immersed in it more recently, and he watches more English football than Spanish football, I would wager. So I respect the credentials and everything that Rafa's done in the game and the teams that he's managed. A la Jose Mourinho 10 years ago, it's such a different discussion, but it's Dyche over Benitez for me.
I think. Sorry, go on. I think the frustration just comes from it. There's not a really one player person that you think, right, that's a real obvious person that we can go to next, and he's the person that's going to bring us the success. Like we mentioned all these different names, mentioned Sean Dyche, where I think if you said to most Forest fans, they'd probably slightly wince when you mention the name rightly or wrongly. Same with Rafa Benitez, in that I'm sure he'd be a great manager for someone, but do Forest fans want him? Is he what we need at the moment? Going back to your point about the players that you mentioned to Pete a few minutes ago, Matt, this is a real sweeping generalisation, but who doesn't love them at the moment?
Yeah.
But footballers in general do not care about anything but themselves. And that is...
footballers have said that as well, not just...
They do not care about... And so the people who like Ange Postecoglou with the ones that he's putting his arm around with, the ones that he's having a chat with, in the same way that if Pete goes into work tomorrow, not Temps, obviously, because he's the top of the tree, but if you go into all these people and you like the person that spends a bit of time with you like the person that gives you security in your job and things like that. Footballers, all they care about is, am I playing at the weekend? If I'm not playing at the weekend, why am I not playing at the weekend? So this idea that they might be, that there'll be some that obviously really want him to work, and there'll be other people that will be quite happy to see the back of him already. And we can say, oh, it's not like that, but it's same footballers like everyone else, people, and as long as they are happy and they can see an outcome that benefits them, they are 9 times out of 10 happy.
Pete, you wanted to come in, and then perhaps you can repeat what Rob said so Thames can hear it.
Oh, you've just slagging you off, saying you have not got the credentials for top leadership level, so that's all. I was just going to say very quickly, and I almost already regret saying this, even though I haven't said it, in case Rafa does get the job, in which case I'll have to pivot to being a big supporter very quickly, because that's the right thing to do as a fan. But Rafa Benitez is like an enormous no for me right now, and I can't imagine many people that I would like less, and that's simply because how much have we talked about needing someone to take the players and the fans with him on a bit of a journey now, have a bit of charisma about it, unifying force, all that sort of stuff. I mean, Rafa Benitez is not that guy. You know, he does not have the charisma to go into a difficult situation like that and, you know, sort of whisper the words that like a Steve Cooper or even a Nuno could to unify. He's a details, tactics guy, and has had enormous amounts of success in his career, although largely quite a long time ago. But he's just not the galvanizing force that you need at a football club that is right up against it right now.
For the people that are going to make a social media edit of that when he goes on to lift the Europa League, it was 5:52:22 on the 13th of October 2025. So if you want to clip the bit where it says it's a massive no for me, that is exactly the time code that you need.
Good. I don't think I've ever wished to be a massive joke on social media, but I would take that one.
Right, let's wrap things up then. Temps, any final thoughts, anything you want to add before we go?
I just want to apologise for mate James Brewer, who spent £200 on headphones for me because he was personally embarrassed about me using a wired headphone on this podcast. Look, I love going to Forest. I'll never miss a match unless it's just physically impossible for me to get there. But I wonder what's to come at the Chelsea game, and of course I want to win. There's no part of me that wants to wish a defeat on our football club so some kind of decision can be expedited. Of course I want us to win, and I hope that happens and we can get behind it. But yeah, I've seen the kind of element of toxic chanting and everything else that has followed this run of poor form of our football club, and I hope we find a way through it soon.
Pete, anything you want to say? We'll give Rob the last words. Pete, anything you want to say?
I don't think so. I've really enjoyed the extra element of Temps just not having a clue what Rob's saying and watching his face while the digs are flying or whatever. That's been really enjoyable for me. So that's all I've got to say, really.
Very good. Rob, last word to you.
What's everyone's plans for Sturm Graz? I was talking about this with my father-in-law last night. So if anyone wants to talk about how they're getting there, I think we're on the evening flight out of Luton. I don't know if anyone else got affected by this. There was a Luton flight on the Wednesday morning. I thought, oh, great, I can go and do a bit of work in Vienna, enjoy myself, have a little wander around. And then it's been changed to the Wednesday night. So this is, if you are 55 minutes into a podcast, this is a level of detail that you want. But what are you thinking for Vienna? Are you going, Matt?
No, I put all my eggs in the Seville basket and did it.
It's probably a good
properly for
choice.
the whole week. Yeah, as it turned out, yeah. Spent all the money. Blew the budget on Seville and thought, well, I'll save the rest for Istanbul, but feels a bit unlikely at the moment.
But thank you very much for having me on. It's been an absolute. I know I say this every single time, but I've genuinely listened to this podcast for the last 5 years. And out of all the things I've done in my so-called career, the one thing that my niece keeps going back to is the fact that I was on this podcast talking about the Europa League stuff. And every time I've seen her since, she said, "When are you going to be back on the podcast, Uncle Rob?" So here we are. Hello, Evelyn.
Well, hello, Evelyn. I mean, I have asked Rob repeatedly, but he's literally in every part of the world, bar Stoke or wherever he lives for most of the time. So this has finally managed to get him back on. Have you been to Graz, by the way, Rob?
No, I've not been, so I'm looking forward to it. I was talking about this last night, so it should be quite an interesting place. I've not been to Vienna either, and so I was hoping to go do a few videos on the Christmas market, etc., and then go down. I don't know if Temps can hear me. Are you going, Pete? Are you going, Temps?
I'll relay that question.
Was that a yes or a no, or was it one of those Julio Giorgio things where there's a long answer to a binary question, and I'm not?
No.
No, he's not going. Are you, Pete? You're going to Utrecht, aren't you?
No, my eggs are currently in the Utrecht basket. Yeah.
Okay.
Which sounds like a bad choice because no one speaks particularly highly of the place. But you know.
Well, oh yeah, that's the one thing I do need to apologise for, because people got in touch with me afterwards, and I've got to make a bit of an apology to Utrecht. This is literally on my notes of things I needed to say. Is when we were doing the show talking about Utrecht, I was quite down on it, and I need to apologise because the reason why I was down on it was we did this thing where we went to see 2 football matches in 2 countries in one day, and we'd been out with my mates the night before in Amsterdam, so. I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but if you've had a bit too much the night before, your mindset might be quite negative the following day. So I went into Utrecht with not the kind of most positive, shiny outlook on the world. So it's probably not Utrecht's fault. And it was a perfectly nice, and it was 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning when we arrived. So it was empty. So again, people of Utrecht, I'm sure it's a fantastic place. I was probably unfairly down on you in the first place, but I'm sure you're fantastic.
Well, we might not have a clue what to do about Forest, but at least we've solved the great Twitter beef of 2025 between Rob Adcock and the city of Utrecht.
I apologise, everyone. I apologise.
Well, are you going to any more Temps? I know you spent about 2 hours in Seville, and that was the game. You think you got airlifted out straight afterwards, but what are your plans?
Yeah, we weren't in on the continent for anything like as long as I would have liked. And I don't think fathers will mind me sharing this, but he wears a hearing aid, so we're back to our twin room for the night. 6 hours of kit to look forward to before an early start. What I didn't realise was that he sets his alarm clock punishingly loud to make sure it kind of overcomes the hearing difficulty that he has. And I woke up in this strange room in a strange country, just absolutely briefly fearing for my life before I saw a kind of half-dressed fathers putting his ears back in, putting his eyes in, and then silencing the alarm. But I think I could bear that once more. So Braga's the one that I'm keen to jump into.
Yeah. We've almost forgotten this European adventure. We'll get back to it, obviously, because we've got Porto coming up. But we've talked. I mean, this has been a weird podcast. I almost feel like I should apologise to Ange Postecoglou because we've spent almost the entirety of it talking about him as if he's not going to be manager, or if he's not even manager now. So it's been a weird one, but hopefully people have enjoyed it. Do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, consider membership or Patreon if you haven't already, and a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify would be great. We shall be back tomorrow. I'll do something completely different. I spoke to Warren Joyce, the B team manager, and Nathan Cantrell, the head of the foundation phase, which is age 7 to 12 at Forest. So we'll combine those two, hear something much more, as I say, totally different, and hear about the good work that is going on at Forest that we could probably forget about because we're so focused on the results on the pitch, which sort of skews everything. But it's really interesting to hear from them. And then Wednesday is Greg and Emily. They're the ultra positive ones, so we'll hear how they're feeling about it, putting their views on it. And then Thursday we'll do a Chelsea preview and then an opposition preview, and then it's the game on Saturday. And as we say, that could be anything. So, join us for that if you can. Michael Temple, thank you very much.
Cheers, fellas. Nice to hear from you, Matt and Pete. Rob, nice send me a text, pal. Let me know what we were chatting about.
Rob Adcock, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being on.
Pete Blackburn, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully Temps is going to be watching this video back with a sort of terror about what might be coming out of Rob's mouth. I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
Temp's become a body language expert, just watching what Rob's doing and deciding if it's about him or not. Exactly, yeah. Right, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for everyone's company. Do hit like before you go. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.